To me, I liken it like you're going to plant some trees that you want to harvest and sell 10 years later. That's what growing a podcast is like. It takes a long time. You can't just expect to be a success overnight. I don't think that's happened to very many people. So if you want to start a travel podcast, don't expect things to be fast. But if you talk about places where lots of people visit, and if you keep doing it, just keep doing it. Don't look at your numbers. It'll drive you nuts. Oh, last month I had more than this month. What did I do? What did I say? Nothing. It doesn't. It's like a fluke. It just happens. You'll get better and your audience will increase naturally. You just have to be you. Find your own voice. Don't try to be someone you're not. That's good advice for life in general. Be you, warts and all.
Hello, Annie. Thank you for joining me for the podcast today, Media Makers Club podcast. I'm just going to introduce you for just a second. Annie Sargent. She's a French native who spent 16 years in the US. She's returned to France with a passion for rediscovering her homeland's rich culture and cuisine. And this journey inspired her to create a weekly Join Us in France travel podcast. And she explores French food, wine, destinations, history, culture, movies, lots of stuff. And she's offering her listeners an authentic slice of French life. So you're based in France right now. What gave you the idea for the Join Us in France podcast?
Honestly, it's because I had been away from France for so long that I felt like I needed to rediscover my own country. I was born and raised in France, but in my late teens, early 20s, I left first to the UK and then to the US by myself. I was one of those kids that just gets up, and like, I'm out of here. And then years later, my parents were getting older. My sister had warned me that our mom was not in good health. And so I was in a position where we could move home to France. And I decided to do that with my husband and daughter in tow at that point. I realized that I didn't know France because I grew up in France. I speak perfect French, but I didn't know very much. And so I decided to rediscover my own country. A few years later, this coincided with my dad passing away. My mom passed away fairly quickly. My sister was right. She was in poor health. My dad passed away a few years later. I had been taking care of him because he was lonely. And so I wasn't working very much. My translation services were kind of dying off. And so I thought, well, when he passed away, I had all this time and I thought, what am I going to do with my life? And I decided I'm going to start a podcast because I love podcasting. I just love to listen to podcasts. And I have been listening to podcasts forever. And I thought, what am I going to podcast about? And then I was like, well, France, of course, like, duh. And I really didn't, it's not like I did market research or anything. It was just out of my interest and passion, really, and happenstance. And I happened to have a very good friend who was a tour guide in France. And I didn't think I could do this by myself to begin with. And so I asked for her help and she was like, what's a podcast? And I tried to explain and it was years before she even listened to our own podcast, okay? Years.
That's funny.
She just, she's like a tour guide. So put her in front of a microphone. I had to make sure she understood, how to talk into a microphone. But besides that, she was ready to talk. She was like, well, I'll talk all day.
That's nice. So what is because you also wrote a book. Did the book come before the podcast or after?
After. The cookbook was a pandemic cookbook. I got bored during the pandemic.
Okay.
And I like to eat. So I wrote a cookbook. I think lots of people wrote a cookbook during the pandemic. It was not a very original idea, I guess.
It's a good companion and you can, of course, your audience is going to buy the book. I wanted to buy the book too last week, I think. I didn't manage. It's still in my shopping cart. But so what type of topics do you just dive deep into the podcast topics a little bit, kind of the content you talk about and maybe what the structure of a regular show is?
Okay, so we talk about anything that has to do with France. So a lot of destinations, a lot of specific interests that are sometimes not things that most bloggers or podcasters talk about. So I'm perfectly okay talking about a place that very few people visit or discuss because I like it. I want to go. So that's really the reason why I think people like the Join Us in France Travel podcast is because it's about what I enjoy. And I think I'm not the only one to enjoy these places. It's just that they never get highlighted. They never get talked about. So we talk about Paris a lot. At the beginning of the podcast, it was Paris, 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 Paris. Okay, because we knew that's how we could find. I mean, that's what people were looking for. And then we backed off of Paris a little bit, started doing the Southwest, and I've since spread out. So the types of content we do is trip reports, because Elyse, my co-host, is not always available, and so I after about a year into the podcast, I started saying on the podcast, I'd like to have guests on. If you're interested, email me. And people just started offering. At first, it was slow going. I thought, oh, this is going to work at all. But it eventually worked out. And so we have trip reports with just regular people who visit France who want to talk about their trip. We have episodes with Elyse. And I did some solo episodes as well when I didn't have the choice. But I'd rather not. I can do it. I can script a thing and I can discuss a place, but I would rather not do that. We did a lot, as far as the topics, we did at the beginning a lot with food as well. So like traditions, every Christmas we would do a Christmas thing. Around the holidays, we would do a special holiday, something or other. It's getting harder and harder to find new things to talk about when it comes to Christmas in France because we've done them all. But you can always repeat. I mean, this is just, if I find someone who just had a trip to France around Christmas, well, that's the perfect one to put at that place. What people tell me is that the content is varied enough that even after they've had their trip, they continue listening. Francophiles will continue listening. There's plenty of people who, once they've had their trip, they stop listening because, they moved on to another destination perhaps that they want to go to. But the true Francophiles will keep listening. And there are a lot of those people.
Yeah. You've got enough topics. Should I say, or should you say it? You have just published episode 500.
Yeah.
So talk about finding topics to be talking about for 500 episodes. And it's funny you said about Elyse, because versus solo episodes, it's very nice to bounce off someone else, your co-host, when you're discussing a topic. It's much more engaging that way.
Right. And at first people were telling me, oh yeah, but you need to make it confrontational. It's more interesting if it's confrontational. But you know what? We're not confrontational. I mean, every now and then I jab her with a silly joke or something because we are friends in real life. So, I can make jokes. Sometimes they're inside jokes, but people laugh along with us and it's fine. She's very serious. Like if you let her go off about a place in France, she will just, you can never stop her, but she's gotten better at this. At first, she wouldn't even give me any notes or any idea what she was going to talk about. Like I didn't have any idea what was coming. Afterwards, I just, I said, look, you have to send me at least bullet points so I know what we're going to discuss, because she was taking me off guard all the time. Elyse has been a major contributor to the podcast. There's no doubt about it. And I've had now several listeners who've come on the podcast themselves several times because they make repeated trips to France.
Yeah.
I have them on again.
Right. So, talking about researching and coming up with notes, how are you researching topics? How do you come up with the ideas? I know you have the trip reports, which is people coming on to talk about the journey they just did.
Yeah.
But other than that, you talk about a lot of stuff, books and films and a lot of other stuff.
So books, it's people who, a lot of people send me books that they would like us to review. There's one coming up soon about a book that somebody sent me. I don't even know who sent it to me. I searched my email, cannot find any reference in my email, but yet I have 2 copies of this book. And I didn't read it for the longest time, and then I finally read it, and we loved it. And so we are doing an episode about it. But lots of people send me books. Lots of people reach out to me wanting to be on the podcast. I'm very open to things like that, so long as they bring helpful, useful information. I even had recently, I don't know if I've released this one yet, probably not, where it's a lady who owns a kind of a luxury inn sort of place, but we didn't talk about her place for the most part at all. We mentioned it for maybe 1 minute out of the 50 minutes because she was talking about the area and what's to see in the area and why she loves it and, who she takes around, what her friends likes to see in the area. And then we mentioned the inn, but, it's just briefly. So I talk to a lot of different people. And that's one of the things I enjoy is just, I'm free. I have a set style, but it doesn't have to fit the same mold every week. If I want to do it, I can do it.
Right.
We even talk about politics now and then. Like recently, we've talked about politics, and it's okay. I mean,
but a big part of your episodes are trip reports. So you invite guests, which you help them plan. Am I right? You're also planning the trips with them.
A lot of the time, I do. Yes. So yes, about 5 years ago. So probably around episode 250, 300, I started offering itinerary services. And when I do that, I help them plan out a really good trip based on their needs and their situation, etc. And a lot of these people then come on the podcast to talk to me. But that's not, if they didn't plan it with me, that's fine. I'll still have them on the podcast.
Not a requirement.
Right. I just ask them to list the names of the places. And honestly, the reason why I need them to list the names of the places is because sometimes when they say them, I have no idea what they just said. So I need to see it written down because some of these villages, like, who knows how they're going to say that word? And I'm just going to say it the French way, which doesn't help Americans either. It's mostly Americans. Most Australians, Americans are the biggest chunk. Then Canadians, then English. A lot of people who live in France too. A lot of English speakers who live in France listen to the podcast.
Yeah, if you live in France, you're free to go and explore by yourself. But if you're planning to travel to France, you haven't been there before, then your show is very useful to that. And I'm sure they tell you all the time, like, I started listening to your podcast and then I wanted to go to France. It works the other way too.
Oh, yes, it does. It does work that way as well. Yep.
So what does it take to produce this podcast? I'm sure you changed your sort of tools and formula over the years. How does it, because a lot of people agonize about, hey, I want to start a podcast and first I'm going to go and buy $2,000 worth of gear and microphones and stuff like that. And then I have to find a place and set it up, all those things. And they end up never starting, pretty much. Right. So how do you kind of practically just create an episode just out of
So I started with, I could show you. This is the SM50 that I started with. I had one that I had bought years ago because we like to do karaoke. And also I have a Zoom H4, which it turned out was not great because it didn't have enough gain. So then I added 2 FET heads to boost the gain a little bit, and that made for better sound because I really wanted to have, okay sound. But the recordings that I did over the phone years ago, because I would call people on my cell phone and I would have my cell phone, I can't remember how exactly I did it, but I had in, out, and it all went through the H4 to record both sides.
Right off the phone.
Yes, right off the phone. And it wasn't great, but it was listenable. Back then, that's what people did. So I think my investment total before I started the podcast was probably 500 euros because I had to buy an extra microphone. I had to buy the H4. I had to buy a foot. I had to buy a few cables. It wasn't very much. And then it was years before I upgraded to the H6, which the H6 has better gain. So I didn't have to use the FET heads anymore. Then I bought a mixing board, the Rodecaster, I think.
Okay. So you grew it.
Yes, slowly. And what else did I buy? No, that's it.
So nothing super fancy. That's what I mean.
No.
Yeah.
No. Oh, I also bought a Zoom microphone. Which one do I have at home? I can't remember. I get the feeling that a lot of people who start a podcast is just because they love all the microphones and all the technology and all that. And me, I'm very simple. I just want a dynamic microphone so I can record in any room. Because, if you have to, a condenser microphone is great, but I don't have a studio and I don't want a studio. Like, why would I do with a studio? So for me, I kept it simple. And I think a lot of the advice that I used to read a lot, but I completely ignore all of that anymore. I mean, I've listened to you. You've talked me into doing a few things differently, which I'm glad I did. But you could always explain why it was important to make a change. Because I had a system that worked very well. I was trying to use, the way I met you is because I was using Descript and finding it really, not my thing. And so I reached out to you on your Facebook group to help me with a consult. And I thought, this guy could really help me. Because that is just not the sort of thing I want to mess with. Like, if I want to learn a technology, I will learn the technology. But if I'm not interested, why force myself? I'm busy enough, so...
You're just focusing on creating the content, not the gear and the gadgets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I'm not into the gadgets. I mean, yeah, sure. When I saw that mixing board that has all the lights, the colorful lights or whatever, it's fun, but you can podcast without it. It's fine.
Yeah. And you record with Elyse most times in person.
Yes, when it's with Elyse, we're in person. When it's with other people anymore, it's through Zoom. You're trying to talk me into Riverside. I might do it. I might go to Riverside. We'll see.
Well, we are recording this through Riverside.
Yes.
So far, no problems. So 500 episodes later, have you changed anything in terms of your approach? I mean, when you started, you maybe didn't expect to get so far, to do so many episodes. Were you kind of thinking, if it doesn't work, I may stop it after 10 episodes or whatever?
No.
How did you start out? Like, I'm really going to do this, okay?
No, I never even thought like that because I was doing it for me. I wasn't doing it for anybody else. I was in a very wonderful situation where my husband was making enough money for the two of us. And so if I didn't make much money for a long time, which was really the case for 3 years, I really made very little from the podcast. To me, I liken it like you're going to plant some trees that you want to harvest and sell 10 years later. That's what growing a podcast is like. It takes a long time. You can't just expect to be a success overnight. I don't think that's happened to very many people. Perhaps a few, but I don't have it. I don't have that sort of talent. So I knew it was going to be, a slow process, but I've been able to keep it real. I haven't had to hide my identity. I can show up and do in-person things with people, and they are lovely. They treat me like I'm their long-lost sister, which is really pleasant. My customers are really happy to talk to me because they've been listening to me for years. Yeah. And so, I didn't, to answer your question, I never thought I would stop. I never thought about it because to me, I needed to do this. I just needed to learn how to do a podcast. Now, at the very beginning, I thought maybe there's other topics I should do that would be better. But that's the other thing. A lot of podcasters will start 2, 3, 4 podcasts. No, not me. I was very happy with this topic. I like talking about France, okay? I didn't get scattered that way. Yeah. So it was focus. I mean, it took a lot of time because I didn't know how to put together a website. I didn't know how to record. I didn't know how to do anything having to do with RSS. Sometimes I read help pages where I understood all the words, but none of the meaning. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. So my husband is more techie than I am, so he could help me. But he didn't have that much time, He was working full time. So there were days where it was frustrating, but it was more like I have too much to do. Like I can't handle the workload. And doing a podcast is like pushing 100 pieces all at once, but just one at a time. Like, okay, so today I have to record an intro, and I also have to send a file to this person, and you have to do so many little things that if you cannot find a good way to organize your time, you're going to be overwhelmed. And that has happened to me. I have felt overwhelmed a lot, but thankfully every time I just think, okay, you got to find a better system. And I have found something that works for me. I mean, and that's one reason why I'm so hesitant to make changes, because if it works, I'm like, well, this works. So
don't mess with it. Yeah.
Don't mess with it. It works. But sometimes I should be more open to change. I realize that it might be better for me to. But like today, I tried to use a new trick with Google and the to-do tasks to add emails to your to-do thing. I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to do that. But I'm very good at just adding my own tasks. I just do that.
Yeah.
So, and I know people use different services, different things. I use Calendly to schedule work consults with customers and recordings with various people. Calendly has worked out okay. It's not as granular a process. I would like it to be more granular. I would like to be able to say, okay, I want to do 3 appointments today, but only one of those every 3 days, because there are some tasks that I do that take longer, but it's not that granular. It doesn't really let you, but they'll get better, I hope. I also use Descript and Canva.
And Zoom. You started doing video.
Yes. Yes. And Zoom. Because I figured out that my patrons, and this was for my patrons, I started a patron thing maybe 5 years ago, and it grew so slowly at first, but now I have quite a few, but I'm kind of at a steady, it's like the same people, gain a few, lose a few, but it's still, it's good.
Yeah. Talking about moving parts. I mean, you said you were pushing a lot of parts around and you have to plan. I know that you do a lot of other things along with the podcast. Could you talk about some of those things? I know you have some tours they're very successful, and the Bootcamp and your community and.
Right. So what I do, essentially, I do voice map tours, and I started writing voice map tours perhaps 5-6 years ago. And I usually publish one a year, and they've always been about Paris, because people are buying more Paris tours than anything. And I just did that because I can't go to Paris. At the beginning, I was trying to go to Paris to do small groups and whatever. It's too expensive. So when I found out about Voice Map, that was really a good improvement. And I've worked with them, and they are great to work with. And I can put out a tour every year, it's been good, because people usually, they try one and then they buy all the other ones.
For those who don't know, how does VoidMap work and this tour?
So it's a GPS self-guided tour. They write the app that will know where you are in the world. And then I write a description. I tell you, meet me at this place. And when they get there, the voice map starts working. So I start talking. And with my voice, I tell them about the place and about where we're going next. So I just drop points along the route. I establish a route, and I have themes for my tours. And people really enjoy them. They would like more of them. But like I said, I do one a year, and that seems to be about how much I can do, because it's a lot of work. It's 2 weeks of full-time work in Paris. So I have to be there for 2 weeks. I have to write it, test it every day. It's a full-time job for at least 2 weeks, but then it sells itself. So it's good.
Nice. And what else? You did a community?
I do itinerary consults, which I think I'm going to try and do fewer of, but people ask for them. So, and how that works is they just book a time with Calendly, and I have a boutique on my website where I can add any of these new things I'm selling. If there's anything new, I will put it on the boutique. So that's the other thing. If you are going to sell products and services, you have to have an easy way to send people to them. So you have to have your own website. You have to have a boutique or a sales page of some sort, and tell people every episode, and preferably several times, this is where you can buy my products and services, because people forget.
Yeah, and it has to be an easy address to mention in audio.
Exactly.
So yours is joinusinfrance.com/whatever.
Boutique.
Yeah.
Anything I sell is in the boutique. So I have the voice map tours, I have the itinerary consults, I have the day trips that I started doing. And that started really slowly, but it's starting to pick up. So I bought this beautiful electric car a couple of years ago. Love this thing. I love electric cars, okay? That's just me. And so I love to spend time taking people to these places. And so I've done more and more of them as time has gone on. They're a bit more complicated because sometimes people are super friendly, but sometimes they're weird. Like the last people I took, they wanted to keep going all day long. So we're walking by this beautiful plaza where everybody is sitting down and enjoying the day. And I'm like, oh, shall we sit down and have a drink? They're like, oh, no, let's keep going. I'm like,
they want to make the most of it.
Come on. We've been walking for 8 hours. Seriously, it was at the end of the day. They didn't want to have lunch either. I'm like, so now everybody, I'm going to tell them, oh, there's got to be an hour's stop for lunch. I need lunch. Okay, I'm sorry. I can't go all day. That lady, she ate one waffle the whole day. One waffle. No, that's not human. That's not me. Anyway, so, this is something I'm developing. What else do? I sell, the one cookbook. I thought I might write more, but
What's it called for people?
It's called Join Us at the Table. Because it's Join Us in France, join us at the table,
Nice. Yeah. And you have traditional French cuisine in there.
Right. So it's everyday French recipes that anybody can make at home. Because people have this idea that French food is all, it's not really. I mean, French people don't have the time to make a 5-hour production of each meal. We do cook a lot, but we have shortcuts. So I just share the shortcuts, share the things that I've learned. I'm almost 60, so you learn a few tricks if you cook every day.
Yeah. And you're not, apart from all this production work you're doing, it sounds like you're running an entire tourism agency, really, to me at least. How do you find time to actually go and travel? You're based in Toulouse, so you're going around, of course, the area, the south of France, whatever, and you research places. I mean, you can't just do an episode by just Googling. You have to.
No. So yes, I go places. So if it's an easy distance from my house, Elyse and I will get in the car and go. If it's a little further, I go usually for the weekend with my husband. And I don't take any free hotels, free restaurants. No, I don't take any freebies because, I want to be able to say I like it or I don't like it. Also, we have friends and family that visit. So every time they come, I just say, okay, we're going to go see a place that I've never seen. Is that okay with you? And they're usually, yeah, that's fine. So we do that. In July, later, I'm going to Lille for the basketball Olympics because I want to. I love basketball. So I wanted to go to that. And at the same time, I'm going to spend 10 days and look around. So I just do that. I just, create trips for myself, just like anybody else would. And people tell me about all these places that I would like to go to, but, I can't see them all.
Yeah, lots of places in France to experience, yeah.
Yeah.
There's always something special in every corner.
Yes. It's the same everywhere, really, if you start digging,
And then you have some episodes with Elyse, which I think she's been on more than half your episode, maybe half your episodes now.
Yeah, she's been on a lot.
And you do a lot of culture, book, not just reviews, but you go through the book and you discuss everything that's happening.
Yes.
And historic personalities, all those things.
Right. So, yes, we do. There's some authors that I really like. I'm a book nerd. Although these days I don't read books, I listen to books. But I love classic books. I will listen to those books again and again. And so eventually I'm like, oh, we could talk about that book because I like it. Or I talk to authors who write books. I've had people send me books that I didn't like, and so I'm not going to talk to them. But I can't tell them I hate your book, I just say, no, it's not a good fit, whatever.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, you seem to not run out of topics.
No.
You have several episodes planned already and lots of them recorded. Have there been any particular challenges that you can think about over the years that, maybe you thought about stopping, or even if you didn't consider stopping, but maybe it was something difficult that you had?
So I think this is a personal trait of mine. I'm just happy-go-lucky. So I have a very steady kind of mood. So I rarely get down, like, oh, I'm tired. And usually if I'm down, it's just because I'm tired. I need to take a couple of days off. And then I just block a couple days off and I'm better. But how do I keep going? I don't know. It's my life. That's what I like to do.
Yeah.
What else would I be doing? Like, I like talking to people about France. Sometimes it's a bit too much. And so I think as I get older, I will probably back off a little bit, like not offer so many services. But now I've added ads on the podcast, which I didn't want to do for years because I host with Libsyn and they have been asking me to advertise for at least 4 years. And I just didn't want to because it seemed intrusive. And then I heard another podcaster say, Patreon supporters get, the episodes ad free. And I was like, dang it, that's what I need to do. So I just made a really cheap $2 tier where all they get is the episode as soon as it's ready and without the ads. Because that way I don't feel guilty. Like, it's going to cost you $2 to get. Because if somebody says, oh, the ads, I don't like the ads. Well, most podcasts have ads, have had them for years.
Yeah, most people starting a podcast, I don't know if most, but lots of people starting a podcast do it with a view to monetize as soon as they can. And they're looking for those numbers to grow. Can you mention, and it's fine if you don't want to, kind of how many downloads your podcast has? I mean, it's been 10 years now.
10 years. So most months, and it fluctuates a little bit because it's seasonal. Travel is seasonal. But most months it's 10,000 downloads over the whole catalog. But I have a big catalog. Sometimes it goes all the way to 20,000. Sometimes it goes down to 5,000. But I've been at least 5,000 per month forever, like for a long time. And I don't do anything aggressive to grow the show. I think I got better and I have to say that ChatGPT has helped me greatly because I can just run the transcript through and just ask for a description, ask for a summary, ask for a list of all the places we mentioned. It's really important to have a good website that people search because Google is not always my friend, but they do send a lot of people who are looking, and especially if we're mentioning places that hardly ever get mentioned, that's the entry point for people. If there are famous people talking about Paris constantly, then that's what they're going to find. But if they're looking for something more specific, then they might find us and then stay on.
So you're offering a search engine on your website through that?
Yes, and I wish it were better. I wish there were ways to make that even better. But there's a list of all the things we discuss in the episode, because that's the other thing they say, make one episode about one topic. Well, it's impossible to do that because people will mention whatever place they want to mention, So in one episode, like one of my listeners very early on, he wanted to do a map to all the places we mention and put them on the map. But it was impossible because in every episode, we might talk about 10 destinations, and they're all over the country. So I try to channel people to, like before I interview them, I try to decide, okay, what's a good theme for our conversation? And try to stick mostly with that theme, or at least talk about that theme at the beginning of the show. And then let them talk about all the other things, But it's very rare for guests to just stick with a theme the whole time. They can't.
Yeah, so you mentioned you didn't do anything aggressive to promote your podcast.
Right.
But did you use any kind of strategy to maybe grow your audience? I know that they come through Google, of course, and maybe they'll find you in the podcast directories and recommendations and things like that. But other than that, do you mention it in your tours, or is there anything else you're doing?
So yes. In the Voice Map tour, I introduced myself as Annie Sargent of the Join Us in France travel podcast. Yes. For the very short time when I tried to market the show better, I actually wasted a lot of time on tools like Later, tools like that where you could schedule a lot of
social media posts.
Yeah, post social media. It's a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time because social media will only show you if you pay them. And so just forget that. I spend very little time on social media. I will post for Facebook. I do perhaps 2-3 posts a week. Instagram, I skip most weeks because the people who listen to me are mostly not on Instagram, but I think I should be. I don't do any TikTok. I should probably because, it's travel, but I think I'm not the teeny bopper. I'm not that person. Like I can't be someone I'm not. So Twitter, I do 1 post a week because I set up the thing. So, so don't waste time on social media. It really doesn't work. It's much better to do word of mouth. Ask people, not you constantly talking about your podcast, but ask people who are guests on your podcast to mention it. I don't get my knickers in a knot if they don't. I can tell which of my guests share the episode and which ones don't. It's okay. It's fine. I ask them to. Some do, some don't. I had this woman on. She worked for NBC years ago. And she promoted the heck out of that thing, because she knew how. She wasn't even trying. She just knew what to do, And there are people who are very nice, but they just don't have a clue how to I have listeners. I had this woman, she was great. She just told me, okay, this is what you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And I was stunned because these were really good suggestions. And she wrote this because she works as a marketer for, I think she said for a big health company. And so she just gave it to me. She's like, because I said on the podcast, I'm not good at marketing. She's like, you're right. You're not good at it. Do this and do that and do that. So sometimes people help me because they feel sorry for me that I'm so bad at it. But, if people like the show, that's all I care about. Like it's about the content of the show. It's to me, mostly.
I mean, it's great that they care and the fans turned into bigger fans. And you do also meet your fans in real life. Tell me a bit about the Bootcamp.
So once a year, okay, so early on we were doing some tours in person in Paris. That was difficult. And then a few years ago, I decided, why don't we just do, this was after the pandemic because people were dying to get out and do things. And so we figured perhaps it would sell. So we did a boot camp where the idea is that people come to Toulouse, and we do it in Toulouse because it's easier for us since we're both in Toulouse. They come to Toulouse and they sign up for a language class in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we have a bus and we go visit one of the places around Toulouse. And we've done 2 of them. And people love it because they come and they are in a bus full of people who enjoy the podcast, who enjoy France, who they make friends. Like, a lot of these people have gone on to be personal friends afterwards, which I think people are really desperate for kind of real connections with other people instead of always being behind their phone or the in-person connection is wonderful. And I enjoy meeting the podcast listeners that way. And that's the other reason why I do the itineraries is because on Zoom, I get to talk to my listeners just about every day. I do not advertise this service anywhere else. If they come to the bootcamp or hire me for an itinerary or a day trip, it's because they listen to the podcast. So it's a self-selected kind of group of customers.
That's great. You're connecting you managed to connect the digital to the real life.
Right. And I think that's really important because people need that. Now, I'm not super comfortable in front of a camera. I hesitated, do I do YouTube? I like voice, but I don't mind being in person. But I don't want to show off in front of a camera. That's just not me.
Do you remember if you had any particularly challenging episode to create and maybe if you learned something from that?
Yeah, sometimes I get people who are just boring. They're just boring. It's very rare, but I've had a couple where I was like, oh my God, this guy is just like, and it's always guys.
There's a trend there.
Yeah. Very few of them though. So that's the thing. When I think an episode is boring, I'm like, what, do I not publish it? Do I publish it anyway? They've done me a favor. They talked to me for an hour. They've gone through some, because I make them jump through some hoops before they can talk to me. So I've always published them, but sometimes I'm not real happy with and it's mostly people who are low energy, like they're like, yes, no.
It can't be easy to make France boring because can't be boring. I mean,
but yeah, no, but some people are just not, and I did an itinerary this week with a guy who was just, I could tell I would not. And I asked him if he had been listening to the podcast. He says, yeah, I listened to one. I'm like, okay. So he just listened to one and then he hired me to help him. But he was like, he didn't crack a smile the whole time. Like I was on Zoom with him for an hour, not a hint of a smile. And my husband and I have a thing about that. We're always on the lookout for people who don't crack a smile about anything. So I noticed and I was like, oh my God, this guy, he's so like deadpan. Like it's like this trip to France is going to probably be the end of him or something. Like, relax. It's okay. It's a trip.
Yeah. I mean, you spoke about people who are fans. They become fans and they give you amazing feedback and they come on the show. Have you had any negative feedback from that?
Some, yeah. I'm very good at ignoring it. But
yeah.
Yes, I've had some bad, there are people who, especially at the beginning, there were people who thought we were, frauds that we didn't. I had a guy write to me and say, I don't even think you live in France. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you think, that's fine.
Maybe your accent is too American or something.
Maybe, I don't know. So, I'm like, well, dude, I got nothing. I don't know what to, like, well, fine. If that's what you think, fine. So I don't get emotional about that. I just don't care. Like, honestly, I don't care. If people don't like the show, they don't have to listen. Nobody's making them listen. It's not mandatory. You can visit France having no idea what you're going to do. That's fine.
What about competition? I mean, when you started, you must have looked around and said, okay, how many France podcasts are there? Travel podcasts. Do I create another one? Is it worth it?
There were not very many. I started 10 years ago. So there was the Eiffel Tower is one. And I actually met him and he invited me on his podcast. I invited him on mine. He's much younger than me. His style is very different. He's much more into the personality podcasting, not so much in the information sharing. He just puts on a great show. He's entertaining. He's very entertaining. And people tell me that. My fans are very often his fans as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
There's room for everyone, yes.
Absolutely. If somebody invites me on their friend's podcast, I'm very happy to do it and I will probably invite them back because why not? But there's room for lots of podcasts. And also I have a head start 10 years ago. So now if you go to any search engine and you say France podcast, it used to be, I didn't think this through very well, it used to be that you would find Radio France, France Inter, all of the official, like the NPR-like or BBC-like radio stations. Yeah, that are, they're like, this is like National Public Radio, but for France. And they're all called France something, France Culture, France Inter, blah, blah, blah. And so if you typed France podcast, that's what you would get. But now, maybe 3 years into it, I started finally getting in the results, But you have to be really patient. Either that or find a name that's so different that the only reason why people would type it is to find you.
Right.
But if you look for a podcast about France, mine's probably going to be in the first 3,
What advice do you have for people who would like to start a travel podcast, specifically travel, not necessarily France, just in general?
Don't do it for the perks of free travel. There are people constantly asking me, is there a similar podcast as yours for Italy, for Germany, for Spain? And they're really not as conversational, not as just easygoing. We're not so, There are some kind of like people who've put on, like the tourist bureau will put on some sort of, but it doesn't come across as natural. Like they're just paid to talk about
authentic
these places.
Yeah,
right. So that's the word I wanted. It's like when you go visit the tourist office, they're very good. They have good materials and maps and things, which I always recommend people go. But they can never say anything bad about anyone. Like, you tell them where should I eat lunch, and they're like, oh, I don't know, anywhere. They're all good, all good. Like, come on. There's got to be some that are better than others. Tell me. No, we're not telling you. Because that's their bread and butter. They promote the area without naming names. So if you want to start a travel podcast, don't expect things to be fast. But if you talk about places where lots of people visit, like Italy, like Spain, England, I'm sure, and if you keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Don't look at your numbers. Do not look at your numbers. It'll drive you nuts because you're thinking, oh, last month I had more than this month. What did I do? What did I say? Nothing. It doesn't. It's like a fluke. It just happens. So just keep doing it. You'll get better and your audience will increase naturally. Like, you don't have to do anything else. You just have to be you. And also find your own voice. Do you. Don't do somebody else. Don't try to be someone you're not. That's good advice for life in general. Be you. Warts and all.
That's great advice. Thank you. Yeah. So I keep thinking, because like I said, a lot of people are trying to monetize this because, how long can you go without having some income from it? And if you are not monetizing the podcast itself, do you think I suppose it's necessary to find some side businesses that are related to it?
Yes, do. And that's vital. If you don't have, and besides, it helps you have, a little bit of income from different things. So do affiliate. Like, I'm an affiliate of Booking. I'm an affiliate of Amazon. I don't make much, but I have affiliate links about these things, and I'm very open about it. You can do voice map if you do travel. A podcast is a great way to increase your voice map, because so I can sell codes myself from my own website. In that case, I make more money, but voice map also sells my tours. And now I need to add them to Google Experiences, I think they're called, whatever. So I can add them to a lot of places, but they all make me jump through hoops, and I just need to get that done. But yeah, create products, travel products that you can sell. So that's going to be tours, that's going to be advice. You can accompany people, but just be aware that sometimes people are not that pleasant. You will like some of them, and some of them you won't. It's just the way it is. I can't really do what Elyse does, like show up and have a group of 20, 30 people that she's never met and just talk to them. Oh,
she has a guide company, right?
Yes. She guides people. So she gets hired by the tourist office of this or that to go accompany a group. She has done, over the years, she's done hundreds of those. I would not be very good at that more. But that's why I say do you. Like, you have to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. But I think you do have to have products to sell besides counting on advertising or affiliate income. Do as many different things as you can. And of course, you could do Patreon.
Yeah.
Think about Patreon very carefully. You have to, at first, I made too many tiers, too many offers, too many things. Just keep it simple, okay? Ideally, you want 3 tiers and 3 offerings. That's it. Keep it simple.
I hear a lot of podcasters actually asking, and if you could expand on this, when they're trying to start a membership, they are confused as to how many tiers or what should be the benefits they would like to offer to make it attractive. How do you do it?
I have 3, actually I have more than that. I have $2, 5, 10, 20, and 50. So I have 5 tiers. That's too many. Don't do what I do. You need to give them a cute name. So, I found some cute French names recently that I changed them to. Once people are in a tier, you can't really move them. And so you're going to have to keep producing for that tier, even if you unpublish it. That's the technical thing. So really, if you can start with just 3 tiers, start, 5, 20, 50 is great. That's ideal. And there are plenty of people who want to give you $50. Well, plenty, no. But there are some people who want to give you $50.
The diehard fans.
Yes. And there are even some that they sign up at the $50 level and they do it for the whole year. So you get 500 all of a sudden.
So what benefits do you provide for that?
So for that, I tell them we'll have a private Zoom. They'll have all of my tours. So I give them free codes to all of my tours. What else? Oh, occasionally I produce extra content. So like it's going to be a short episode about something having to do with history, typically. So that's usually something I'm researching anyway for one of my tours. Okay. And so I just rewrite it a little bit, expound on it, because for the voice map, you need stuff that's short, pithy kind of stuff. So I write the long version and I share it with patrons. So they get anything I also do a Zoom with my patrons once a month. So whoever wants to show up, and I do it 3 different times because I have some Australians and I have some great Australians there's 3 ladies that show up. So now it's just the 4 of us. I have more, but they don't show up. So that's fine. And I do 2 mostly with the US. I probably offer too much for Patreon. But again, it's mostly talking to people, which I don't mind doing. So, but like if I made things, it would be hard because then you have to make a thing every month. The month goes by fast, especially if you're also doing a podcast. So think about, not doing too much.
Nice. That's good advice.
And then anytime you produce anything for patrons, you have to mention it on the podcast.
Yeah, so, of course. So you often call out the new members or your patrons. If people want to reach out to you, maybe be on your podcast or I don't know, find you, where can they go? Give us your links.
So Annie at joinusinfrance.com is how you can email me, and that's what I look at most. You can find me on Facebook. Join Us in France has a closed group, so you'd have to join the group first, which means you'd have to listen to the podcast first because I don't want to let just anybody in. Because, man, do people have... they will join a Facebook group just because they don't want to Google something. I swear to God. So those people, I'm sorry, no, you can't come. Yeah, Annie at joinusinfrance.com is really the best way to...
And your show and... your website, your Patreon?
Joinusinfrance.com is the website, and patreon.com/join us.
That's
no
easy.
Spaces or dashes.
Easy to remember. Yes. Thank you very much. I mean, this was
thank
great.
You. You have been, and also hire good people. Like hire Cristi. As soon as you're making some money, hire people to take stuff off your plate that you don't want to do yourself. This is so important because you can get bogged down, and every now and then you have to turn it all off and just go on a walk and think. And you will not have time to do that if you don't have people helping you around. And you're really the only one. You and Elyse are the 2 that I go to, and it's it's very good. I should find someone for a newsletter. That's my next thing, because I hate the newsletter. I cannot do the newsletter. For some reason, I can write a voice map tour, but I can't do a newsletter. But I have a lot of people joining the newsletter, and then they email me and they say, I'm not getting the newsletter. And I'm like, yeah, that's because I didn't send anything out.
I think you're overthinking it with the newsletter.
Probably.
Because you're already providing a lot of content to patrons. You're providing a massive amount of information in the podcast itself. I mean, every episode is at least an hour or around an hour long. You put news from the week, politics, whatever happens. You're covering very famous events like the Olympics and the Tour de France and whatever's happening in the country at the time. So plenty of information there, and I think you're overthinking it. Why not just announce every podcast episode every week?
I could.
You know?
I could. Yeah, you're right. People tell me all the time. I have friends that are good at this. They tell me, just send something out. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this was great. So much information there, and it's so great to see how you're just hanging in there with it, and you've gone on for 10 years and hopefully 10 more at least.
I think so. Yep. That's the plan. Yeah. Thank you very much for all you do, Cristi. I mean, really, you've been, you've taken a lot off my plate that I did not want to do, and that's really important.
Thank you.
Merci.
Happy to do that. Thank you very much. And thanks for giving me the time today. It was great.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening. If you made it this far, check out the website, mediamakers.club. And also, if you want to subscribe to this, you should be able to find this podcast on all of your preferred podcast platforms out there. And I hope to see you on the next one.